In Chapter 7 of Volume 2 of Great Expectations, in the beginning we see Jaggers performing his hand-washing ritual. Page 192 just says that my guardian was in his room washing his hands with his scented soap when I went into the office. And then he goes on, I embraced this opportunity of remarking that he washed his clients off as if he were a surgeon or a dentist. He had a closet in his room fitted up for this purpose, which smelt of the scented soap like a perfumer's shop. It had an unusually large jack towel and a roller inside the door, and he would wash his hands and wipe them and dry them all over this towel whenever he came in from a police court or dismissed a client from his room. And then later it says that he comes back and he sees his head butted into this closet, not only washing his hands, but laving his face and gargling his throat. And even when he had done all that and had gone all around the jack towel, he took out his penknife and scraped the case out of his nails before he put his coat on. And so we see Jaggers, wanting to get rid of that courtroom grime, but really it's more this more of a metaphor of washing away his emotion. I think that, he is tainted. He doesn't really like what he's doing, is what I believe this is trying to say. And it makes him feel unclean. It makes him feel kind of awful. So he just wants to get rid of it. Maybe in part of it is just kind of washing away the emotion too, even like the empathy, the sorrow, those good things too. But it would be hard to carry all that when you're working and trying to help people and they get executed. That's a lot to weigh on a person. And this washing is kind of a metaphorical way of dealing with that. Can you think of other instances of, sort of excessive hand washers in literature? What comes to my mind is Pontius Pilate. He was the Roman who sentenced, I think, Emperor Jesus to be crucified. And it says that he comes out, he gets a bowl, he washes his hand to say, I'm not guilty of this man's blood. That's kind of one of the most famous ones. Another really famous hand washing is of Lady Macbeth. I don't know how many of you would have read Macbeth maybe when you were in high school, but do you remember that line? Like she's washing, out, damn spot. And she says, will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? It's just so desperate. So he does this. Anyway, Jaggers invites Pip and his three friends, Herbert, Drummle, and Startop over for dinner. Now, Pip isn't so crazy about Drummle, but at least, he's happy with Herbert, and Startop is okay. So they go to Jaggers' house, equally dark and gloomy. As everything associated with Jaggers seems to be. And it's actually really not that dissimilar to Miss Havisham's. It's worse, but it's not as bad, but it's still very dark. And he occupies only 3 rooms in this huge house. He also brags about how he never he doesn't, but Wemmick brags that Jaggers announces very loudly all the time that he never locks his house or anything, because who would dare to try to steal from this man that they're so intimidated by? Wemmick has also told Pip to observe the housekeeper. There's something that's odd about the housekeeper, and in fact, it is odd. It's obvious that she is intimidated by Jaggers. She never takes her eyes off of him, but yet she shrinks back when, she gets too close to him. Then there's this incredibly strange scene in near the bottom one, page 196. So they're just kind of sitting around. The housekeeper's coming to clear the table, and Drummle and the others, they're kind of showing off their muscles. And this is something that I'll talk about in a minute. But on the bottom of 195, suddenly he, referring to Jaggers, clapped his large hand on the housekeeper's like a trap, as she stretched it across the table. So suddenly and smartly did he do this that we all stopped in our foolish contention. If you talk of strength, said Mr. Jaggers, I'll show you a wrist. Molly, let them see your wrist. She's like, no, I don't want to. I'll show you a wrist. He takes out her wrist. Let them see both your wrists. He took his hand from hers and turned that wrist up on the table. She brought her other hand from behind her and held the two out side by side. The last wrist was much disfigured, deeply seamed and scarred across and across. When she held her hands out, she took her eyes from Mr. Jaggers and turned them watchfully on every one of the rest of us in succession. What is going on with this woman? Who is she, and what has happened to her? We'll find out. Okay, as well, when they're at Jaggers, you know, I kind of had mentioned to you that Jaggers is incredibly adept at getting people to confess things. And so he basically kind of gets all of them to reveal their vices. So Drummle starts talking about how he really doesn't like people, and Startop, what is Startop's thing again? He's kind of a baby, or a weakling, I think. And then Pip starts going on about how he's really bad for spending a lot of money and, you know, can't help himself. And so, I can't think, Jaggers really gets them going on this, and they're all kind of, and then they get into this fight, and they're all quarreling, and I think Jaggers is instigating all this. The other thing is that Jaggers sort of takes a liking to Drummle. He calls him the Spider, and he's really affectionate, but this is sort of, you know, pulling out Drummle's scorn. We realize that he actually despises the other guys, like absolutely hates them. He hates Pip, he hates Herbert, he hates Startop, he hates them all, hates every one of them. Even at the end, Startop's willing to just forget about the quarrel, you know, the way that, like, guys often do. But Drummle's all morose, and he's just, like, pouting, and then within a month, he's gone. So that's chapter 7 at Jaggers' house.